I remember enduring them or sitting quietly with them. Now I don't.
Being all too familiar with workplace discrimination, Tasneem Chopra has made it her mission to champion multiculturalism, diversity and inclusion. Tasneem has received recognition with an Order of Australia Medal, an AMAA Woman of the Year award, and an invitation to present her own TEDx Talk. When Tasneem speaks, businesses and organisations listen. Find out why. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Peace be upon you all and welcome to another Safi Bros podcast. Alhamdulillah, we have absolute pleasure today having Tasneem Chopra here today with us, an amazing sister who has done a lot of work in the multiculturalism world and leadership. And mashallah, she's done so many amazing things. She's on the drum and she can sort of fill us in on everything else as well. Mashallah, and all her work that she's done. Welcome to the Safi Bros podcast.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you for coming and giving us your time today.
My pleasure.
Jazakallah khair.
I think I would like to start as a young girl. We're born in Australia.
I was
Tell us a
born
bit
in Kenya.
No way. I didn't
I'm
know
like
that.
fifth generation East African born. So my family were all in East Africa for 5 generations. And then in the, I'll just put it out there, in the early 70s, my family decided to migrate to Australia.
Any reason? Just
Well, so Idi Amin was a dictator in the Uganda at the time in the 60s and 70s. And what was happening is a lot of people of South Asian background were being forcibly required to either leave or lose their homes and whatnot. So that was happening in Uganda, which was adjacent to Kenya, where I was born. And so my parents had to make a decision about, do we risk losing our home and our assets or instability, or should we consider migrating? And at that stage, so my dad was a doctor at the local hospital, which was part of the Commonwealth, because Kenya was part of the Commonwealth nations.
yes.
So he had an opportunity to, apparently, I didn't really recently found out, he had the chance to relocate to Hawaii or Australia.
Oh, wow.
I know, but they chose Australia. And initially we moved to Alice Springs for the first 9 months. And if you can imagine Nairobi, which is an equatorial city, and it's 25 every day, and it's green and it's lush and it's verdant, and then going to Alice,
Wow.
which was hot and dry and red
and
dust.
red dust.
So my mum was like, nope, we can't do this anymore. And so within 9 months, we then moved to Victoria because my dad got another secondment to Bendigo, which is where I grew up.
Oh, wow. Bendigo.
At the Bendigo Hospital, which was, again, part of the Commonwealth. And so he got a secondment to that hospital. And so, yeah, we moved to Bendigo, and I got there, joined grade 1 at the local primary school.
How many in the family?
It was me and my 2 sisters.
Two sisters.
So I'm the middle child,
Wow, mashallah.
which is a whole other conversation.
Yes. No one listens to the little child, apparently.
I need a microphone. I grew up in Bendigo. I spent primary school there, high school there. And I didn't get to Melbourne until I finished year 12.
SubhanAllah.
So very much a really parochial country town in the 70s and 80s, which, I mean, at the time I hated it. I wanted to live in the city so badly because I always felt like I didn't belong in the country. It was a very parochial white Anglo experience to be in that, and I craved for the company of people that looked like me. And the first time that I recall really seeing that experience was when I started attending the Muslim youth camps.
The YMA.
Yeah, because there was 4 Muslim families when I grew up in Bendigo. One of them was Ahmed Hassan's family, the Egyptian family.
Yes.
And they moved to Melbourne before I did. And when they moved to Melbourne, he found out about the camps. And then he notified my parents and said, there are these camps that are existing where young Muslims from all around Australia can attend. And it might be an opportunity for the girls, if they're interested, to go. And so my parents thought, yep, why not? Because there's nothing like, there was no madrasa, there was no Islamic schools, there was no halal anything, especially in Bendigo. So I remember going to my first camp at the age of 13.
SubhanAllah.
And then seeing all these people that were like black and brown and white and like my mind was blown because I figured obviously Arabs were Muslim, but I'd never met a European Muslim before.
Oh, wow.
And so I have written a chapter in a book called How I Happened, which is a chronicle of growing up Muslim in Australia. And that chapter focuses on my time in Bendigo. And there's one particular scenario during the youth camps where in my cabin there was a girl from Bosnia, which I'd never heard of. And I'm like, what's this Bosnia? What are you talking about? And she was trying to explain it. And then eventually, my knowledge was so poor and sparse, and then she had to say, oh, it's former Yugoslavia. I'm like, oh, why didn't you say so? I'm like, my politics was so off center at the time. And then I was very confused because she had blonde hair, blue eyes. Her name was Jasmina. And I kept asking her, so you're Muslim? And she's like, yeah. I said, but are you sure? She took real offense, understandably. And I just stormed out of the room, and I was like, wow, she doesn't look Muslim. So I'm just asking, maybe she's here by accident because it's a nice camp. And yeah, it was
no
big learning curve.
Then,
big learning curve.
Oh
But
my God,
I met
subhanallah.
Turks and Bosnians and Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Bengali, Lebanese, Turkish.
So that's when you got exposed to the
That's when I
community.
got exposed to the breath, and I realized that living in Bendigo, I would wait for these camps in December, which went for 10 days.
Yes.
And I think my parents were like, fine, go for 10 days. Just get all the kids out of the
You
house.
and your sisters or just you?
All three of us would go. We were
Wow.
the Chopra sisters. We went, the three of us would go.
Subhanallah.
And it was literally the highlight of my year.
Allahu Akbar.
And that's where I learnt so much more of the depth of my
Brother Mahmoud's getting a lot of
religion.
hasanat. Wallah, yes.
Well, I met him. He wasn't like an emir at those camps. I mean, Sheikh Fahmi was one of the
Oh,
top.
mashallah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because these were national. They weren't Victoria based.
Yes.
And we had kids from New Zealand.
AFIC one first.
Yes, it was the AFIC camps.
Yes.
That's where
Like
they
the
started.
old school, the original ones.
Allah.
The old school, the OGs. So AFIC came, I mean, the YMA were much later.
Much later, yes.
I didn't really go. I went to maybe one of those, but I went to a
Mashallah.
good 6 of the other ones.
Amazing
Yeah, I
work.
think it was the original ones from Sheikh Fahmi.
It's still missing that.
Yeah.
That's
We are
stopped,
missing a
actually. We are
national.
missing a national.
Oh, we're sort of grasping on at the moment.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, we
Well, the
got about.
population's expanded. So, I mean, you can do a full numbered camp within a state now.
That's right. Yes, that's correct.
But
That's
back
true.
then you had like 110 kids coming from Adelaide and Darwin and
connected the
Sydney.
community.
Back in the 80s, that was huge.
Yeah.
And New Zealand.
So why Perth? Alice Springs. What made them go there?
There was a Commonwealth hospital that had a secondment. But it's a very interesting story because my dad was he was a pathologist. So that was his histopathology and forensic pathology. Have you ever guys watched Quincy back in the day? Yeah, okay. So listeners may not know Quincy, but that was what he used to do. But when he moved to Alice, he was working with the Flying Doctor Service
Wow.
at the time. I only found this out recently, the extent of the work that he did. I mean, he passed away 7-8 years ago now, but alhamdulillah. And he used to fly out to remote communities, Indigenous communities, as part of the doctor service. And he told a story once that when he would go out to these services, he'd go with a team of presumably white nurses and white pilots, whatever, but he'd get into the community, he'd treat the locals from the remote townships, and they would say to him, they'd touched his hand and they said, brother, it's so good to see a doctor looks like us,
Wow.
you know? And I only found this out in the last 5 or 6 years, but
Subhanallah.
I can just imagine that kind of impact, again, because he came from being a doctor in Africa, in East
Yes,
Africa, where he
yes.
would have had patients of all backgrounds, but then to be in Australia and then experiencing that
Wow.
and to have that recognition and that connection, it must have been an incredible feeling.
Subhanallah. And then Bendigo.
And then Bendigo.
Bendigo.
Yeah. So
How was life there? Were your parents very practicing? Were they?
we were visibly Indian looking, South Asian or Indian looking. The Muslim thing was something that I learnt to express when it was Ramadan and I would be fasting at school. People were like, why aren't you eating? Why aren't you eating? I said, because in my religion we fast in Ramadan. So I had all these rote responses because my parents taught us to pray. During Eid, my mum would decorate the house and make certain foods on the day of Eid. So she'd decorate the house, but in advance of Eid, make lovely food, tell us about our history of Islam. But again, there was 4 families, Muslim families in Bendigo, Indonesian, South African, the Hassans, and us.
Wow.
So we didn't really have a large world view of the nuance and the depth and all the detail stuff, which is what I learned at camps,
Subhanallah.
So my parents did the best they could do, but they were also, very proud of the cultural tradition. So I had a very strong Indian cultural rearing as well. And that included obviously diet and food, but Indian music and dance. And so the three of us,
wow.
Chopra sisters, we were known for our Indian dancing. We learnt from a teacher how to do dances, and we would perform at the local YMCA for the Indo-Australia Club, which we were members of for like good 12 years.
Subhanallah.
Did a lot of cultural dancing and got to classical singing of Indian songs. My dad and mum were very musical. My dad could play the harmonium and mum could sing. And it's very common in Indian tradition for singing to occur in community settings. It's a very, very common thing. So they would have weekly or fortnightly gathering of the many
Wow.
30 families in Bendigo who were of Indian background. And once a month there'd be a function, and I could sing about 15 songs at one stage.
Wow.
Wow.
And we would perform them, and sometimes we would dance.
Any
And
songs for us today?
Not today. Do you have? There's no backup. No backup.
The Safi brothers are your
No, but I loved it, and it really.
Subhanallah.
I mean, it gave me a real appreciation for Indian culture and music at the time, which I still have. I probably thought it was pretty daggy then, and I used to sort of dread going to dance class and dread singing then. But now it's like, damn, that was so good. That was such a great insight into, the cultural ancestry that I have. So I had that as well as the Islam, and in many ways they fuse what I do and my interest in diversity and culture. Because here I am, this kid born in Africa of Indian origin, growing up in country Victoria. I had a lot happening, and Muslim.
How did you reconcile all that? How?
I probably embraced it much later in life, but I was always curious about where people are from. And because of that, I was predisposed to wanting to know about people's stories. And that lent itself to me being really good at expression and good at English and drama and any kind of platform or frontier where I'd get to talk about my story or listen to someone else's.
Subhanallah.
And then that informed my interest I ended up doing psychology at uni, which is obviously studying people. And my favorite unit in my arts degree was anthropology, the study of culture and society, which I think doesn't get enough of a rap. It's just the idea of studying where people are from and their heritage and their ethnicity and their stories and their lineage is stuff that if we all did that, we'd have so much less friction and war, because we'd appreciate where people are from and not demand they be from where we are.
Yes, yes.
We'd have a greater understanding of, wow, the depth and breadth of where you are, different religion, different culture, different history. And I still am enormously fascinated by that. So that's something that I've always had as a hobby and an interest, inform what I studied in. I worked in community development after university, and that was, again, engaging with communities from diverse backgrounds, which if you are a person of colour in the community sector, you somehow get lumped with that role because you're considered to represent that community, even if it's Macedonian or Turkish. It's like, you can do it, Tasneem. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm doing that now. And I did. I sort of would run with it. But it made me appreciate, I guess, my own difference and value that when you are coming from a diverse background and you have overcome stereotypes that people throw at you, you actually know what your capacity is versus what people's capacity is of you.
Yes, 100%.
And I saw that in colleagues, I saw that in friends, and I would see really bad media representation of minorities, including and especially of Muslims, and that would really anger me. So it was a situation, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to complain about it, or am I going to get in there and make a noise and do something constructive? So I think that heralded my interest in community work. So I started off volunteering for the then Islamic Women's Welfare Council of Victoria in the late, I want to say in the 90s, in the early 90s, mid-90s. And I was with that organisation for nearly 30 years.
30 years. Who was head there?
So that one of the founding members was Leila Alush.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
wow.
Well, you know, yeah, right. So back in the day. And it started off as a group of women sitting around a coffee table.
Still around?
Sarah. It's rebranded. It became the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights.
Oh, wow.
And it, probably over 15 years ago, it rebranded. And it's now gone from a group of women meeting around a coffee table talking about how do we help a sister who's, in a domestic violence situation, right through to being a national advocacy body for immigration laws and visa laws and protecting women and homelessness and substance abuse and all the issues that we face in our community. So it's huge. And I chaired it for about 12 years. And then I finally stepped down just before COVID because I'd done enough. 30 years is more than enough. But that kind of experience gave me an entry point to actually walk my talk and say, if I'm angry with the system and angry with policy and angry with treatment, what can I do? How can I advocate for change working within the system rather than just being angry with it all the time, which is easier to do?
Yes, 100%. Chuck the darts.
I'm not sure what the question was now. I just got to went all around.
No, I just want to tell you took us through that great journey. No, amazing. Okay. But take us back. I just want to go back to your young days at school, university, and high school. Yeah. So take us through that journey. Bendigo, we managed the Bendigo Easter Festival.
I hear. So, I used to go to back before you were probably born. But it was the iconic, the Sun-Lung Dragon.
So tell us, private school?
State school for primary and a private Anglican school for high school, which was also interesting because it was a boarding school.
Wow.
It was. I mean, we went as day students, but it had a boarding school component. And when I was towards the upper years of my high school, we had several, probably like 5 or 6 students from Malaysia who were Muslim.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. I heard.
And because they were obviously Muslim, my parents were like, "Oh, we must call them for Eid and we must call them for iftar." And so there was the 4 guys and the 1 girl. I remember them really well. I remember their names, and they used to come home, and we became like the second family for them. So that was beautiful. But in terms of primary schooling, state school in the 70s. I was one of the brown kids there who.
So how much did you stand out comparatively?
A lot.
And how
I was the only brown kid.
So you're the only brown kid.
Yeah, my sister was there.
And how was that? How was it?
My early memories were of kids in the playground calling me black tongue.
Wow.
And abo, and having to hide in the bushes during lunchtime so they wouldn't see me or find me.
Wow.
And having groups of girls who I was lumped together with when I started school to be my friend set to get to know me. And then I remember like within a couple of years or sooner, like they got girls can be so mean. Oh my God. I remember them getting together with me and saying, Tasneem, because they didn't say Tasneem, they said Tasneem, we've decided there's too many girls in our group, so you can't be part of our group anymore.
Allah.
Wow.
And I just had no other friends.
Allah.
And I was like, okay, well, what am I going to say? I was very respectful of people telling me things without ever advocating for my own agency.
Allah.
I kind of was raised to don't cause trouble. So I accepted it. And so I had no friends. And then literally a few months later, there was another girl in the group with blonde hair and brown eyes who was told by the members that there was too many people in the group. But because she'd been adopted, she couldn't be in their group either. So then she and I became friends, Fiona. And I'm like, wow. I mean, you realize the intensity of how cruel that is in retrospect. At the time, it was just like, well, what do? I'll just play by myself kind of thing.
Wow.
And so that was primary school. That was pretty rough. And just the name calling was mainly intense in the beginning when I was a novelty. After that, it just got a bit more of a being ostracized, which then you just be dealt with.
How did you deal with that? Like, how did you?
I was just good at school. I was a very good student. I was just like threw myself into my work and was like the teacher's pet. Did really well.
So you took the path of excellence.
I did, and I think it was also expectations from home. Like you need to do well. And my sister was like an A student at everything.
Ooh,
so it was like
competition.
God, she set the bar really high. So I never did as well as her. She took out the award for everything every time. I just would get second, and I was fine with that. I was okay with that. Living in that shadow, but she never flaunted it. But it was always a pressure you feel from your parents. You need to do better. You need to do well.
She did better than you. What do you mean?
Exactly. Yeah, she was just perfect. She was perfect. She was the prodigal child, and I was like, well, I'm the middle child, so I'm meant to stuff up, right? That's the expectation. But I got my head down, and you find your tribe. And I think by high school, that I found the odd misfit. That's who I gravitated towards, the person who was just a bit socially awkward, or a real arty person, or very, very nerdy. Like that, they were my people.
Wow.
And then I found the subjects where expression was enabled to be where I would thrive, which was drama and English. Dreadful at maths, so poo-poo at maths and science. It was not even funny. Biology, though, was not so bad. But I just looked at physics. I'm like, why? What? I don't understand. How will this help me in my life ever? I don't understand. So I gravitated towards platforms that enabled me to be me, and people that I didn't have to cut and paste myself to fit a certain popular mold. Who became my crowd?
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask, young kids going through school now that might be in Cairns now, a Muslim family going through your situation, what advice would you give that young person going into a community that's not Muslim orientated, what would you tell that young person? What advice would you give them?
Like the magic of who you are is something that the others were going to find out in time.
Allah.
You know, you don't have to undersell yourself or cut corners to be like the rest, because the beauty of who you are is there for them to find out. When the time is ready, they'll come.
Did you ever do that? Did you ever undercut yourself or undersell yourself?
All the time. You know, changing your name or trying to fit in, or if food was served that wasn't halal, I'd just say I wasn't hungry. Or if there was ham in it, I'd pick the ham out and then eat the food, because I didn't want to make a big fuss out of things. I would do all kinds of things to shortcut myself to survive and to be okay, rather than say, I don't like this, I can't eat that. And that's something I probably learned, you know, even much later in life, is that idea to advocate for myself. And funny, I'd be telling others to do it, but I wouldn't necessarily do it myself. It was so much easier to literally preach to people about believe in yourself than be the person to put up your hand and say, I'm sorry, this is not working out for me.
Allah.
That came much later.
It takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? It takes a lot of courage.
Especially when you're the outlier in the room. You're already female, you're already brown, you're already Muslim, you're already like largely invisible. Why would you make a noise? People will just dismiss you as problematic.
SubhanAllah. And that happens a lot today.
It does.
It happened to us even like in our schooling.
It does.
SubhanAllah. Allahu Akbar. No, I love how you
Which university?
So I started off at Monash for first year. I did psychology there and anthropology, which I loved. But then I noticed the psychology there was going to lead students towards a much more research component based, and I wanted to do more clinical. So then I transferred to Swinburne.
Oh, wow.
Where I graduated from.
Amazing.
And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wish I had done anthropology, but my parents were like, what is anthropology? Like, I mean, obviously my dad's a doctor and my mum's a nurse, and like my sister did accounting, and here I am doing an arts degree, which was already very, very radical. But anthropology was
not
just
a doctor or lawyer,
it's
is it?
not. It's not doctor, lawyer, engineer. It's not. Psychology at least sounded like a science. Anthropology, what is that? Now, to quote them, which may or may not get edited, it was like, who will marry you? So I had to drop anthropology.
Oh, no.
But the irony
that was the boss.
That was the bar. But the irony is my entire life has been the manifestation of anthropology. I'm a cross-cultural consultant. That's what I do. I work in the space of diversity and belonging and inclusion, and all I do is anthropology, which is so I've come full circle from that moment. But yeah,
amazing.
When did you find that where you said, when you said to yourself, this is what I want? When was that
my
moment?
calling?
When did you know that was your calling?
I think it was very gradual. I think there's two components. There's like, when did I decide for myself that what I am is enough? It was probably literally in the last, maybe, how old am I now? 50. So probably in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so.
Wow.
But in terms of, is this the direction I want to take? It was probably after 9/11, I got thrust into responding to community calls for what is Islam? What is the deal with Muslims? Do they hate us?
Wow.
So, and that would take the form of going to a church group or a neighborhood house or the kindergarten association, and I took that as a good sign, because rather than them accept the rhetoric that was coming out of media, they actually wanted to know. So
They'll bring the hand up to ask.
Yeah, as opposed to accept it at face. And I thought, I need to go in, because if I don't, then who will? And they're going to just believe today, tonight. Literally, that's going to be their threshold for what is Islam, or current affair. For context for the listeners, if they don't know, today, tonight at the time was not the best source of media. And so I'd have to go in there, and I'd go in there with what was my I think my main brand of presentation was Islam 101, myths and misconceptions, or myth busting. Islam 101, myth busting 101. I know it's something to do with that.
Wow.
So what does the real Islam say versus what you hear? So I started doing that on the side of work, or when my kids were young and I'd taken maternity leave, I would still do voluntary community work. And through my association with the Islamic Women's Welfare Council Victoria, which was getting a lot of inquiries about Islam, but also a lot of issues of Islamophobia facing Muslim women. It was like, okay, we need to do something about this. So we need to respond. And so I started responding to, so just getting back to your question of when did I realize, when did the penny drop for me? I started responding to Islamophobia and issues of misperceptions about Muslim women by doing media training, which was one of the best courses I ever did, probably in my career, in terms of how it prepared me for dealing with interviews and public presentations and speaking out. So I'd always enjoyed debating at high school. I probably should have pointed that out earlier on. So I didn't mind taking a platform. Maybe it's a middle child thing too. I'm not sure. But I didn't hesitate to use my platform if I had it when it was a debate or a talk or an interview. But strangely enough, in personal one-on-one interactions, I would clam up.
Wow.
And maybe that was an introvert thing. Maybe that was a South Asian, Indian be a good girl thing. But somehow when I had a mic and a platform, then I would never hold back. It's like literally kind of I don't want to say bipolar, but it was literally a way. I feel like I had permission to mix it up and shake it up.
When you were on stage.
When I was on stage. Or when I had a platform. But when I didn't have it, I would just like put up with all kinds of rubbish when I wasn't with the platform. So I'd respond to all this Islamophobia, do these sessions, do media interviews.
Can you tell us a few like situations that you've had and how people would approach you about Islam? Just we've all been there.
Yeah,
but can you give us some funny moments?
I'll give you some real funny moments.
Some head-scratching moments.
Doing some media interview. I was doing the project. I don't know how many years ago, and it was responding to some Islamophobic incident that happened overseas, and I was there to deal with how the Muslim community feeling about it, and to present the perspective. And I remember being in the green room, and the makeup artist came up. This is many years, way before Leaders on. Just for context, like way before. And the green room makeup artist came up to me, and obviously I didn't need to have hair because I had a hijab on. He has to do the makeup. And I remember it was a young man who was doing the makeup, and he's like, I love what you have going on there. I just love the headdress. I love the headdress. It made me feel like I was some sort of show pony performing like in Vegas or something, the way that he was like coming at me, and it was like, and I had another woman like, can I touch it? And like before I can respond, they're touching my scarf, and I'm like, oh wow, oh, it's so soft, it's so pretty, it's so soft. So this fetishing and exoticization, it never surprises me how confident people feel in just thinking you're an object. Like you're on show.
Yeah.
Like, can I touch? Can I feel? Like, do you talk? Do you breathe? But one of my favorite moments of media interaction was when I was doing an interview as the chair of the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights, and the photographer arrived to take a photograph. I'd spoken to the journalist, and there'd been some Islamophobic incidents against women. There'd been an incident overseas, and there'd been a lot of collective punishment perpetrated against women here. Bricks thrown through mosques, through schools, and hijabs pulled off, hot water thrown through women at traffic lights through the windows of their cars. There were some really horrific things, and we'd heard about it. And I remember having to explain to the journalist what had been happening. And she was very sympathetic and great. And she said, look, I'm sending a photographer over to take a photo to accompany the story. This was for one of the local papers, the community leader papers, right? Yeah. Maybe again 10, 15 years ago. Photographer came, a young woman, and she started to take photos, but a lot of photos. Can you stand here? Can you stand there? Can you stand at the desk? Then she's zooming in on my face. It was like more than comfortable. And she was really irritated and getting frustrated with me. And I remember at that stage I was wearing like a hijab that was draping over. And she actually said to me, she said, do you mind lifting your scarf and putting it over your face so we can just see your eyes?
Wow.
And I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, could you please just do that? And I'm like, why would I do that? That's not what I look like. She goes, well, for the look. And I'm like, wow. So she was trying to literally stereotype me to create an image, which you can imagine that kind of image accompanying an article would just invoke fear in people. And she was literally playing into the tropes that I was complaining about that we're dealing with.
SubhanAllah.
And I just thought, I'm going to be telling this story to in public forums for the next 20 years. And here I am. I believe she's still a photographer with some major broadsheet. But yeah, so the license that people have to say things to you which are so inflammatory, I remember enduring them or sitting quietly with them. Now I don't.
Have you ever changed the hearts? Have you ever physically changed the hearts? Obviously in your work, obviously.
I don't change perceptions. more than heart. So if people will come and say, I did not understand that about, Islam or women or diversity, post a session when I'll go in there and do it. Or it'll come at me through a DM through my website that people will say, I attended your session last week, it was so powerful. Or I did appearance on the drum and I'm talking about things, and they'll say, you made me realize that perhaps I've got it wrong. Perhaps I need to. And I don't go in there with the intention of targeting an individual's mindset. I just go in there to tell people what I think is wrong. And I wish I could say that I'm moved by this, spiritual calling to make people's hearts, to change people's hearts, but I'm just angry. Honestly, I'm just angry with the way people perceive women and women of color and Muslim women, and how Islam is understood in the media context, and how there's such a bias towards nuance and balanced reporting. And I think now that I'm over 50, I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed officially able to be a grumpy woman. And so I do.
You're taking out on the school kids.
I am. I don't hold back.
You remind me of the Wog boy, when the anti-pasta, they're laughing about anti-pasta. And now they're all eating the anti-pasta.
I've turned into the woman I used to cringe over, but that's who I am, because I just think my threshold is just enough already. We know better. It's not like you don't have a reference. It's not like it's 1980 and I have to believe what I'm fed. I can fact check.
Yeah.
I can research. If you're just going to be lazy bum, and then why should I have to deal with all that negative treatment and behavior because you're too lazy to do the work?
We had a warehouse in Brunswick, and we subleased the warehouse to this bloke. And lovely gentleman, husband and wife, and quite affluent, and they were using it and leased them the warehouse for 3 years. And
well, at the time we were very small in nature, and we had a big warehouse. We thought we'll sublease some of it. So we spoke to the owner, said, listen, the rent's too high. We're going to sublease some of the warehouse. Is it okay? He said, yeah, done. No problem. You guys are good. And we found some guy coming from Shepparton.
Yeah.
And he wanted to use us to park his cars, his luxury cars. So he had an apartment in the city, in the Docklands, and he was, we were in Brunswick, so it was very close, tram away.
Yeah.
And, 3 years later, we've outgrown the place, and we said, we've got to tell him he needs to go.
Because his lease is up.
But he's such a nice bloke, How do we do that, I said, it is what it is. What do you do, bro? We've grown. It's a good thing. You'll be happy for us. Our business has grown.
Yeah.
So me and Ahmed walked in there, and, we've written the letter, giving him 3 months notice. We didn't give him 1 month.
Which is like contractual right. Like an area.
3 months is very generous.
Anyway, so me and Ahmed, look, I think we bought a box of chocolates as well. Look, sorry.
Baklava, it was baklava.
Baklava, yeah, we did. And we said, look, we're sorry, this is the circumstances. And he's like, what's this? He goes, it's 3 months notice. We've got to ask you to leave.
Because your contract's up then.
And he's looked at this letter and he's like, we should have killed you in World War II.
Whoa.
No, his exact words was, we should have killed the whole lot of you in World War II. Like that. And this is a guy we ate with.
And Ahmed, I thought, I was waiting for Ashton Kutcher to come out punked. You've been punked. Where is he? I'm waiting for the cameras. I'm looking. I'm just going, what are you looking for? I go, he's definitely pulling a woolly on us here. He's definitely pulling it. And I've looked at him and then I'm like, what did you just say? He said, you heard me. We should have finished you all off in World War II.
And then I go to Eva, hold on, calm down. I said, brother, in the last 3 years of interactions, have we ever disrespected you or not treated you with utmost respect? I treated you like my own father. How could you say that?
Yeah.
Like, how could you say that to
me?
And
his wife was sitting in the corner.
His wife was he was enraged.
She was shocked. But he was a veteran from Shepparton, old school.
Yeah.
We didn't know that was ingrained.
Yeah.
It was so ingrained that we were shocked.
Wallahi.
Me and Ahmed, we left there.
I was like, we're scratching our head.
We were like,
you just.
That was so challenging. That was very challenging.
You know somebody, right?
3 years. Like, we've eaten with them.
We're talking about he used to leave his keys to his warehouse
with us
to check up on us. We used to go to Shepparton for 3 months.
Wow.
That's what we're talking. Like, and we're a very good judge of character. People, people. That was one day we weren't seeing coming.
Like, do you have anything like that?
Well, I don't have a warehouse, so it's really hard. It's really hard to compete with that. But I remember in year 10, year 9. Again, this is Anglican private school in country Victoria. I'm one of the only Muslims in the entire school, bar a few boarding students from Malaysia. And I had to attend RE. It was standard, religious education. Yes. So that's fine, whatever. We had a young guy come who was a born-again Christian. was telling us about his, his heady interactions with drugs and alcohol, and then near-death experience, then finding God, then coming through, then traveling the world and spreading the message of God. Fine, okay, all good. He proceeded to tell us about how he'd been in Malaysia. And during his time in Malaysia, he goes, and I was spending some time with some colleagues that I had there, and he goes, they were of the Muslim background. But we all know that their prophet Muhammad was their Muhammad was a murdering swine.
Wow.
All right. And I wasn't really paying attention because I'm like, yeah, whatever, RE class. I'll just, be a polite student and attend. When he said that, I'll never forget that I felt my heart pounding so loudly that I was sure somebody could hear it. And sure enough, the guy next to me, his name was Dougal, bless him, he actually turned and said, "Are you okay?" And I looked at him, my eyes were bulging out of my face, and I'm like, I need to say something. He can't just say that. He can't just say that and that be okay. And everyone else has heard that, and it hasn't been. And that was my first experience of, fact checking and calling out.
Wow.
And I just put up my hand and I said to him, because I've been raised not to question authority and not to ever say, to counter somebody who's a leader, who's a teacher, and this guy was a guest teacher. So so it was really hard. And I'm like, excuse me, sir, but don't you think it's more of an opinion than fact to say that the Prophet Muhammad was a murdering swine? That's all I said to him. And the blood drained from his face because he didn't expect there to be a Muslim kid in a country Victorian school back in the 80s.
Yes.
And he's like, and I've never seen anyone backtrack so fast. Oh, no, like, that's not what I meant. Like, some of my best friends are Muslim.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
And I'm like, okay. And like, yeah, that's not what I meant. Like, I think he used something like you took it out of context or you didn't understand. And I don't remember the extent of how he backtracked, just that he backtracked. And I just felt this pressure valve release. Like, that I'd said something.
Yeah.
And then I didn't let it go. And it's that moment of if you see an injustice, feel it with your heart, feel it with your hand, feel it with your mouth and say something or do something.
That's right.
And that was probably my first interaction of having to defend Islam in a way that I never had to. And I never told my parents about that because I would have been like, why did you speak up against the teacher? So I just held on to that one.
SubhanAllah.
And it was very challenging and made me really, really anxious and nervous. But at the end of it, I felt vindicated.
Alhamdulillah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, SubhanAllah. I had a very similar situation because I used to do RE as well. I went to St. Joe's. There's no Islamic schools back then, so Mum wanted the best education for us. And I remember watching Malcolm X, the movie. And obviously, obviously he's in jail, and the preacher's talking about Jesus, peace be upon him, and they've got the white photo, and Malcolm X stands up and says, "Where was Jesus born?" And he says, Bethlehem. Where is Bethlehem in Palestine? And are they, what color are they? And they're all olive skin. Yes. He goes, "Why are you worshipping a white God with blue eyes?"
Yeah.
So I went back to school. I got some ammo on this teacher. So he's talking about Islam as well, and because he was talking about different religions, and they didn't know I was Muslim, same like you. And I said to him, "It's interesting. Can I ask a question?" I did exactly the Malcolm X movie. I got kicked out of class in front of everybody. And all the students, my close friends, said, "What you're saying is really, of substance." They kicked me to the principal, and the principal gave it to my life for questioning their faith and questioning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because back then as well, which I found out recently, you couldn't put a Muslim kid in a Catholic school without one of your parents being Christian.
Oh.
So one of our parents had to tell the school that they were Christian. If they were both Muslim, the kid was not allowed to come.
How did you get in there?
One of our parents said they were Christian. That's the only way you could get into a Catholic school then.
You got to do, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Survival, right?
SubhanAllah. But they were the best
they wanted to change because I went to St. Joe's North Melbourne.
Yeah.
They wanted me to be Arnold, not Ahmed.
Wow.
And I said,
and now he used that as a nickname for him, Arnold Keith.
Of all the names, not Adam, like
Arnold Schwarzenegger back then.
Arnold. I remember in grade 5 I had to do RE at a state school, which was, that's how state schools operated back in the 70s. Would have been, I don't know, but maybe it was 1980 actually, grade 5. And I remember the RE teacher was, I think he was the equivalent of a new age hippie, but back in the day. And he was talking to children in the classroom about Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, but he's like, okay, how many of you think, you know the story of Jesus? And like kids are putting up their hand. I'm like, yeah, whatever, Christmas time, whatever. I didn't really understand the depth. And then he said, how many of you think that Jesus was white-skinned? And I didn't put my hand up. I remember putting my hand like that. And I didn't even know that he was not white. I'm not going to do that. I don't know what possessed me. And I folded my hands. Everyone else put their hand up. And he leaned his hands on the front desk and he told the class, if Jesus had been white-skinned, he'd have been a freak.
Wow.
And he looks at me and he smiled. And I'm like, I won. and I wasn't even trying to win, but I won. And he goes, where was Bethlehem? Where was, and he was like, oh, yeah, I guess it was. So that was very unexpected to me. And what a progressive teacher to take that and it's such an opportunity to be be
Yes.
without me realizing it. And I'm proud I didn't put up my hand and think he was white, because then I would have felt really dumb. But I was stubborn. And he goes, yeah, he'd have been a freak if he was white. I never forgot that.
Subhanallah.
MashaAllah. So you've had quite a fruitful.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff that I'd forgotten about now, because it's all coming back now when we talk about it. But I guess there were a lot of incidences, good and bad, that you have on the way that make you who you are and draw and endear towards people that are on the same line of thinking. And I know I have good, solid, Christian friends, good, solid Jewish friends, good, solid Muslim friends. But then I've had lots of interactions which have been very, how shall we say, sketchy within our own Muslim community often.
100%.
Yes.
From people like, why are you doing that work?
Yeah.
Why are you advocating?
It's the hardest thing, isn't it?
Why are you advocating for this family violence stuff? That should be, we can work it out. And I'm like, but sometimes you're not working it out. Sometimes what you're doing is actually making it worse. And having those difficult conversations with community leaders has probably the biggest challenge that I never expected.
Wow.
Can you give us an example?
Oh, I don't know if I can.
Come on.
I don't know if I can. Classic.
Don't worry, we've had Sheikh Qadi Isa, ISIS had him on the topic.
He said to us that
oh, wow.
both sides wanted him dead. So ISIS put a hit on him, and the ultra-white put a hit on him.
Yeah,
because they said he was ISIS, and the other one said he was working for the government. They both wanted him dead.
But in many ways, those two aligned on many other topics anyway now. So that's not even news anymore. That's like, take a number shot here. It's like, that's all of us now. No, but I remember back in the day when we having some incidences of, I think it was women having, difficulty negotiating divorces, or there was some issue. And so we had an internal meeting of community leaders from various peak bodies within Victoria. And it's like, we have a crisis, we need to resolve it. And it got through to the media that some Muslim women are having trouble even getting divorces and having to escape violent marriages because their husbands are using, all kinds of things over their head, whatever. It was pretty intense. And I'll never forget being in a room with some of our community leaders who, when we were talking about, I was representing the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights and representing women who were escaping violence. And they were representing some imams, I think it was, who had been performing marriages in some cases, or not enabling divorces of certain community members, and it was causing a real difficulty for these women in their lives. And I remember a particular case was being shared without the names being mentioned, and someone said, what did the person say? They said, you have to understand, Tasneem, that we are going to stand by the imam in this particular incident because he's a high-ranking and highly respected leader in our community. And that is our priority. And I remember having to look them in the eye and say, well, my priority is protecting women who are being beaten.
Wow.
And like the room just went silent. And let's just say it's been a tricky relationship with me and that community leader for some time. But like sometimes the hand that you're dealt with is what you have to work with. And sometimes being that one person in the room to call out the elephant that nobody wants to talk about. It's not easy.
We've been in those situations.
It's not easy, but someone's got to raise it. Someone's got to raise it. And I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't have any personal connection to the client or to the imam, but I thought if I don't say something and we don't say something, it just goes on. To me, the way our communities responds to and negotiates tense issues leaves a lot to be desired.
We're getting better.
No, there is. There is some. I see a lot of good people on the front lines doing the work. But it's like with everything. You're always going to get detractors, naysayers, people who put you in your box, tell you stick into your lane. And I'm used to that from the mainstream. I'm used to that from executive level and governments and media. Yeah. But when it comes from the community, I just don't have any patience. I'm like, you know what, dude, I've got enough.
It's always harder from your own people, isn't it?
It's more disappointing.
Yeah.
It's more disappointing because you expect that from.
Yeah, that's why you expect it.
Yeah.
You don't expect it from your own kind.
No, you don't.
SubhanAllah.
That's the tough thing.
Moving from that to sort of some highlights, I think.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear like your proudest moment.
Proud moments. You know, it's the ones that you don't see coming. It's, okay, how do I put this? So I remember going to give, and I've done a number of talks in schools where I am invited to be a guest speaker at a school, public school, private school, to students because some of the moments, I'm invited to come and talk on issues of identity and belonging. That's one of the was a really big theme in high schools at one point because it related to English unit that we're studying and the novels they were reading. It was about identity and in some cases the books were about someone of Greek background or Lebanese background or African background. And so the students were studying what it's like for that person to navigate two cultural playhouses at once, right? Nice. And so I'd be a guest speaker and talk about my story, whatever. Wow. And I remember coming to one school was like this private elite girls' school. God, I remember a horrible incident I'll talk about later too. But at the private elite girls' school I went, and it was mainly students that were pretty Anglo, with a few maybe Chinese Australian background. There was a couple of brown girls in the back, right, whatever. But I gave my talk and had Q&A, and it was really riveting. And the conversations that students and younger people ask you are always the best because they don't have a bias.
Yeah.
They'll just tell you what's on their mind.
Yes.
And there's no filter, and it's wonderful. I think sometimes you get the best questions and the craziest questions, but not the usual formulaic questions that you get from adults sometimes. Not you guys, though.
Scripted.
Not you guys.
The scripted ones.
Yeah. And so I did my bit, would go home, and then like a few hours later, I'm looking at my inbox, and there's someone who's gone and located me by Googling me, because young people are very efficient. They'll Google you, they'll realize you have a website, they'll realize they can message you through your website, and they'll message me and they'll be like, you came to our school today, and can I just say that I've never been so inspired to see a speaker that looks like me come to our school. And I was like, whoa, that's really, really beautiful. And to feel motivated. And I've had other kids from some Islamic primary schools when I've come out, like she got mobbed in the toilets by a bunch of young kids because they were like, oh, we've seen you on the telly. And like they run up to you and they cling on to you, and like you're trying to come out of the bathroom and they're all over you, and someone wanted me to sign something, and I'm like, who even signs things anymore? I mean, it's not even a thing.
Take a selfie, goddamn.
Exactly. They haven't. They're in primary school. They don't have phones, thank goodness. But this little girl came up to me and she's like, oh, because of you, I want to be a writer now.
Allah,
and write my story. And I'm like, wow.
It's amazing. Just don't know whose hearts you touch.
It's so powerful. And that, like we were speaking before, you know, if you can do it the second way, you know, if they can see it, they can see that light.
That's the adage in diversities. The mantra is, if you can't be what you can't see.
Exactly.
Right? So when you demonstrate that role model capacity in a way that's approachable and that's friendly and that's realistic, and like, I didn't have to be Elon Musk with $1 billion to be able to get to what I did. I just, you know, you try and be a decent person. You try and call out an injustice. You try and be truthful and authentic in your representation of yourself. And the kids can see right through it when you're not being genuine. They have a very discerning filter, right?
They do, mashallah.
So we talk about the retreat, seeing is believing.
Yeah.
When you see it, you believe it, especially when it comes to, you know, you having that identity that somebody else has as well.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. It's amazing.
And I remember there was in a city school that I went to again, we were really, really diverse. And I was like, why are they calling me to come and give this talk? So I did, and I went and gave the talk, and the students were really very progressive, switched on, like year 11 and 12 students. I'm one of those schools where they don't have a uniform and everyone's just like, calling their teacher Jan and John, and like it's a really, really modern school, but really smart kids. And a young girl with hijab, I think she was of East African background, and she came up to me and she literally whispered to me, we've never had a teacher or we've never had a guest speaker that looks like you. You're the first one.
Wow.
And I was heartbroken, though, that it took her until year 11 to see a teacher or a guest speaker come and speak in a way that they could resonate with.
Yeah.
And then I looked around, the entire teaching body, it was all Anglo.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there doesn't have to be, because I know I can like reel off, maybe you probably too, 12, 15 teachers we know from our community.
100%.
And like, why are they not, why are schools not hiring in a way that reflects, this is the work that I do in diversity. It's, you need to represent the communities that you serve in the organizational makeup that you have, especially at who sits at the table.
100%.
So diversity in leadership, if it's not reflecting who you're serving, you are missing the mark in terms of what kind of nuance, what kind of buy-in you're bringing,
100%.
what kind of cultural contributions that you can make, the networks that you have, the linkages that you can make. You miss it out, right? And I see that happening in schools at a really early stage, and that I guess that informs a lot of the work that I do in the diversity space.
I was speaking to the health department today, and I said one of the conditions should be working for council, you must live in the Hume area, because they've got half of these staff that live outside the community and don't know the community whatsoever.
No.
I said, I think that's what I said. I said,
and that shouldn't even be radical. That should be like logical.
Yeah, because you live in the Hume, you should be working for the Hume so you can understand the people. To just touch on base on that, I was just speaking to Subhanallah today. I was speaking to her. She goes, "That's a great idea. I'm going to put it to the mayor."
It's amazing. It's amazing. We see that even like we've seen that. I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said to me, a house inspector came to check him up, and he's got a shop in country Victoria, and he goes, the person came from a different locality completely to check up on his shop, who didn't even understand the logic of the area.
Yeah.
When you're bringing outside talent in, you're getting people talking at you, not to you.
Yes.
Because they're going to come back they're going to speak to you from the mindset that is centered on their life experience and their worldview, right? But if you're speaking to people who get it from that place, and that's what I say about cultural diversity, when you have people from a cultural diverse background sitting at a table, because diversity is so much more than gender.
I mean,
right? Everyone seems to think gender is balanced, which is important, but it's not everything. Because if half your population are women, but all the women are from the same postcode and from the same ethnic background and have studied at the same university and done the same course and can send their kids to the same school and drive the same cars and will be buried at the Melbourne Cemetery, how is that representative of who we are?
100%.
One in two Victorians are either born overseas or have a parent born overseas.
Wow.
That's who we are. But that diversity is not modelled and reflected back in leadership and non-decision-making tables in this country and in this state. And until it is, we're always going to be getting close to but not quite hitting the mark when it comes to content development and service and marketing. And so I guess that's the work that I do in the D&I space.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Allah wiki. Subhanallah.
So tell us, what are you working on now? So where are you up to at the moment?
So I'm on a few boards. So I sit on the advisory committee for Fire Rescue Victoria, which is kudos to them for recognising that in terms of diversity and engagement, they need to be doing, better, right? So that's been an interesting appointment. And prior to that, I'd been on the board of Ambulance Victoria, again, with an opportunity to really interrogate how is the state service that's responding for all Victorians tracking in its ability to really target Victorians of all diverse backgrounds.
Were you part of because they're doing iftar now, were you part of that as well, that growth?
Yeah,
amazing,
because when they started. When they started,
we did one of their catering jobs.
That was my first year on the board. They started iftars.
We did with Dr. Amar, remember? He was one of the guest speakers. MashaAllah. Amazing.
So again, it's an opportunity to acknowledge that and it's not just about engaging with Muslim communities. It is about engaging with everyone and everybody and understanding that breadth and that depth. And I think that's also been growth for me in my career as well. That it's so much more than just within our community. There's this whole engaging with Indigenous communities and newly arrived and asylum seekers and long-established communities that somehow never see themselves reflected in an organisation when it comes to leadership and when it comes to the content of an organisation. So what do? They do their own thing.
Wow.
We have our own community groups. We have our own, which can be okay, but the reality is governments are there to govern for all, not just for one cohort.
Yes.
So they have a mandate to ensure that they fund you. And they're only going to fund you if they see you, and they're going to see you if they know that you're important. They're only going to know if you're important if the people at the decision-making table are from that community.
Subhanallah.
So you got to work backwards and think. I always look at what does utopia look like in Victoria or Australia, and it looks like free access and service for everybody from whatever background, whatever socioeconomic class. And in order to get there, it starts with who's making funding decisions. And who's making choices of content and who's developing the programs. And so I do a lot of work in the arts space because how does the arts in our community and the creative people in our Muslim community is insane. Like we have so much talent. Yeah. But much like the Muslim community, I see diverse communities, whether it's African Australian or South Asian Australian or Chinese Australian whatever the diaspora is, I don't see them getting platforms and having shows or having films or having the same kind of funding and traction that goes to, say, art, ballet or opera or theatre, which is fine, but that's only half the population.
Yeah. Wow.
So why are we not mixing it up? Why are we not allocating funding? And then often it's because those communities don't even know how to access the funding.
Don't even know it exists even.
They don't know it exists. They don't. The culture of knowing how to apply for funding in the state government is like a whole other degree. And there's a knowledge gap because the people who are setting the parameters for that aren't coming from those communities. In the same way they don't live in Hume, they don't come, so they don't understand. Like, well, everybody knows.
Oh, we were saying that the other day because we had on a watch the comedian. What's his name?
Bassem Younes.
Bassem, yeah. And we said the Muslim community is needing entertainment.
Yeah.
We don't have it.
Yeah.
We don't have anything where we can plug into. We don't have, like you just mentioned, subhanAllah.
Yeah,
We're talking about that because
there's no lack of talent. There's no lack of talent.
a lot of talent.
We have
There is a lot of
it's the
talent.
platforms, because the platforms are governed by people who are coming from a particular socioeconomic and cultural group
Amazing.
that don't understand they need to make place at the table. So it's about having difficult conversations with, like, you need to extend your table.
Yeah. How do you find that the top end?
Challenging. It makes people really uncomfortable.
Wow.
But that's okay. I
Is it
always
because
say,
you're putting a mirror?
yeah, it is. And I can say that because I'm coming as an independent person. I don't work for government. I don't work for a consulting firm. I'm coming in as an independent and saying, I give them the data sets, and then I'll show them evidence of research, say by a nice, respectful, Western-funded organisation like McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group, that will demonstrate as soon as you diversify the mix at your table, your profits will increase. And then they're all paying attention.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I can make money from diversifying? Yeah, okay.
Done.
SubhanAllah.
Yes.
The money's the hook.
It's always
Tackle with their love. The love
Yeah.
of the heart.
That's how I mean.
follow the money. Right?
Even though we're talking about that, we should be organising an event a month minimum. Like, we should be hiring out a major place and doing an event that's art, culture, education, whatever. You know what I mean? Whatever it is. Like even like mosaic, whatever. But we should get people out there and doing, because there isn't much. And subhanAllah, like, Bassem Younes was sold out. That day it was sold out because why? In every, and we saw the people there were all mainly Muslims,
Yep.
like, 80%
Yep.
Muslims,
Yep.
they say. And that's the ones that went and paid the $80 to watch him, And there was a lot, you know what I mean?
It was very entertaining too.
And entertaining, but,
I missed that. I was overseas. The day I came back from overseas, but I heard it was sold out and it was amazing. So
Well, Allahu Akbar, and we do need that. There's no doubt. Maybe we can talk about how we get funding.
I don't work for the government, so I can't tell you that. But yeah, but the process is just riddled with understanding the culture of funding in the sector, and that is a very specific speak. And I mean, it's a long, convoluted way of saying the systems are designed by people that are very disconnected to a lot of the state. And so it's even when you apply for a job these days, they'll ask you for things like not just the selection criteria. There's a particular term that they have in job applications that you have to be able to meet and demonstrate, which just to answer that, I mean, I have like a master's as well, and I look at it and I'm like, I can't do this. This is really difficult. How do I answer this question?
Oh, God.
And what they want of you is so formulaic and of a certain format that doesn't actually reflect your skills. It just shows if you can answer the question.
Yeah, that's what I had, because the only job I ever applied for was
Key selection criteria.
Key selection criteria, yeah.
Oh my God.
SubhanAllah, when I applied for the Department of Justice, my first ever job that I've applied for in my
Yeah.
history of my existence, I applied for one job, which is the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
And when I got the application, it was, oh my God. And
Convoluted.
oh my God. And then, and believe it or not, I had like a senior writer write it with me. And I came in sixth.
Yeah.
I was the last person to be interviewed, and I got the job.
Yeah.
I had the skill set, I had the capacity, I had all that, but it just showed I had to translate it into that for it to fit, and I was so challenging. And wallahi, went through 4 reviews by 4 different people.
At the risk of being, radical, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's about decolonizing those structures. Decolonizing job applications, decolonizing board memberships, decolonizing application processes so that they're actually accessible for everybody and not just one particular cohort who continues to get the funding to produce the same content that's seen by the same audiences and perpetuating no change, right?
So stuck in the loop.
The circuit breaker in that is is diversity in leadership.
Yeah, 100%.
And
That's what you're doing,
getting-
mashallah.
Well,
yeah.
you try, but sometimes it's just want to stay home and just sit on the couch and
It is.
with my
There's no
cat,
challenge.
sit with my cat and watch Netflix.
Or the old
'cause I'm
saying,
done.
you speak very good English.
Yes. Well, you're different to the others. You're different to the others. You know, you're not like those ones you see on the television.
Sorry.
We all have it. We all get it. Yeah, I get complimented on my command of English and my grasp. And I'm like, like, where did you learn? Like, what's that accent? And I'm like, Bendigo. That's where I'm from, you know.
Allah bless you.
You know what you should say next time? Please. Saudi Arabia, Sharia.
No, my best comeback is when they say your English is pretty good. My best comeback is yours is pretty good too. Yours isn't bad. It's like keep at it. Keep at it. You know? No, humor's a great antidote for a lot of the stuff that I deal with. I think it's again it comes back to the arts that I really enjoy. I think arts is a medium, whether it's comedians or writers or filmmakers or performers or musicians or poets, they have a way of shifting the narrative in the public realm that can just be seismic in its impact in a way that you know, even more than a policy can make, a politician or it can make. You hear a really powerful song or a poem and it stays with you, it shifts you. Or you read a really good book and it's like you're transformed. You know, and I think that's the power of art. And I think that for me, that's probably going to change the world before, you know, a political revolution.
Like, if you look at it, look at Islam and the amount of investment they had, like, you know, in that era of arts, you know, like you look at the Andalus, Allahu Akbar, you know, that was like the epitome of art and culture, and you know, this is where everything came out. And that's why I wanted to go to Spain and see all that. Allahu Akbar.
Isn't
and the
Andalusia
Hamra.
like the most beautiful place
That
on
was the
earth?
best. Like that was the best place I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
Allah.
I just came back from there, and I'm still like, I'm going to go back.
I was blown away. I was blown away by it.
Oh my gosh, I got another.
And that's
amazing.
that.
I haven't been, so.
Amazing.
It's incredible. Well, speaking of art, I mean, Islamic Museum of Australia. Can I talk about that?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, we know the story of people who go there and see the tour, non-Muslims who experience the tour and literally come back. You would have heard from Shireen and Ramsey and Mustafa. Like, they change. Like they change because it's right there in front of you. Whether it's the inventions, whether it's the mosques, or whether it's the the heritage that the early Muslims have brought into Australia as from the Macassans, and people are transformed by that. And it's a very gentle immersion.
Yeah. And you see a lot of people, we went to events there, obviously, and you can see people actually Google searching stuff because they don't believe some of that stuff. They think they've been sold. You know? They're doing a sales pitch.
Ashton Kutcher just going punked. Like,
but I've seen it because it was subhanAllah. Amazing initiative.
Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate the conversation. It's been beautiful. We love ending the podcast with an I am statement. And I'd love for you to say your I am statement in a single sentence if you can.
Okay, it's going to be punctuated with a few commas, but I will do my best. So I just came back, for context, I came back from a conference in San Francisco just a few weeks back, which was a young women political leaders conference for women who are from the APEC region prior to the APEC summit that was there. And there was a motivational speaker by the name of, her last name was Jefferson Nouri. She was this incredible woman. Actually, I got her name wrong, so I'll edit that out. But anyway. And she came out with a proclamation to all the women in the room who doubt themselves or who feel that they're not achieving as much as they could. And these women are like, oh my God, we could have a podcast about these women. They're all women with I thought they were women with political aspiration, but they're women who've been in government or in politics, and they're in their 20s and 30s. Wow. And some of them have achieved incredible things. I met the former vice president of Philippines, and I met a woman who had been a political prisoner in Nicaragua because she had been protesting for the environment.
Wow.
A woman she'd been in solitary confinement for 606 days because she was protesting the environment. But these women have come out and they're angry, but they're actually using their experience to change the world. And they've all been exiled out of their countries. And women exiled from Hong Kong, from China, from New Guinea, from Thailand, from Philippines, from Nicaragua, South America, from Morocco. Women from everywhere. And so the motivational speaker, she said to them a mantra which I'm sticking with. She said, I want you to tell yourself this and believe it. She said, I am enough. I do enough. I have enough.
No.
And it was that gratitude
for
understanding that, you're okay. What you're doing is okay for right now. This is where you're meant to be, and it's serving you.
Alhamdulillah.
And doesn't mean I can't aspire for more, but right now I am enough. I have enough, and I'm doing enough.
Allahu Akbar. Allah
Allah
bless you.
barik. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for trusting us.
Well, I haven't seen the finished product yet. But so far, Safi is so good. Safi's so good. Do you say that? You should say that. Safi's so good. But yeah.
Allah barik.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very
Jazakallah
much.
khair.
Beautiful,
Alhamdulillah.
quick conversation. And
Please don't
enjoyed it.
forget, guys, comment, share, and subscribe, please.
That keeps the
Any
podcast
questions,
going.
inshallah, please let us know. Inshallah, we'll forward them on, inshallah, as well.
Jazakumullah khair.
It was a pleasure to sit back and just yarn.
It was nice. Jazakallah khair.
So much there.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.